Hi, I'm Ted.
You okay? Oh God. What happened to you?
Am I bleeding? Am I bleeding?
Yes, that's your bleeding.
Is it Wednesday again already, my dudes? Hello, my beautiful people. Welcome to 4+. My name is Mr. Ratio, and today we are going to be going over a new, at least new for me, series called Ted's Caving Journal, created by Alex Archives. Now, this series is a direct adaptation of an early internet horror story, Ted the Caver, by Ted Hedgeman. This story is considered one of the earliest creepypastas on the internet, but it revolves around a fictional cave diver named Ted, who explores unexplored caves with his friends, but his entries start to become more disturbing as the entries advance. The story was published online in 2001, and was considered to be real by some people due to the photos attached to the story and the overall creepiness. But as for this YouTube version, Alex Archives follows the creepypasta almost beat for beat, so we shall get to enjoy all of the horrors of cave diving. Now, enough with the introductions, kick back, relax, because it's gonna be a hell of a time.
Wait, before I let you in with your fake ID, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on our socials, and join that Coolio Discord we got. We also have a gaming channel if that is of any interest to you.
I hear footsteps. Okay. What the hell?
All the links will be in the description. Alright, now you can enter.
Floyd Tomb. Now, for our first journal entry, we begin with Floyd's tomb, which appears to have a date recorded of December 30th, 2000. The tape begins with Ted explaining that he has brought his camera with him to this spelunking trip because he found something interesting at the bottom of the cave. Ted reveals that he is with a friend, who wishes to remain anonymous, so Ted refers to this friend as B. As B gets the ropes ready for them, Ted takes us over to the mouth of the cave and shows us the route that they're going to be taking down, giddy with excitement as he explains. Once they are ready, Ted and B begin their descent into the cave. After about 40 or so minutes of crawling and trekking through tight spaces, they come across a water stream deeper in the cave. Another 20 minutes in, the camera cuts to Ted explaining that they've made it to the end of the passage, and that they found the hole that they originally trekked down there for. The hole is about 3 meters large, and Ted peeked into it to see what was going on, and he deduces that it's large enough for someone to crawl into. The presence of air blowing also hints at a larger cave system deep inside the hole, so Ted wants to come back with some more equipment to be able to open it up more and explore what lies inside. The batteries are almost dead for Ted and B, so they wrap up the video as they decide to head back to the surface. Mystery Cave. This entry begins on January 27, 2001. The tape starts with Ted in the mystery cave, explaining that they are back, and he explains that they're not revealing its location to keep others safe and to not have someone come exploring the Virgin Passage as they're trying to widen it. Ted shows off the tools that they have brought in their attempt to widen the new passage, including a sledgehammer, a pick, and an electric drill. Ted takes us along to show us the mouth of the Virgin Passage that they want to open up more. After reaching the hole, Ted and B begin measuring and trying to figure out the safest way to widen the hole. The two slowly chip away at the hole, trying to widen it. Throughout the tape, there's this ominous rumbling in the background that can be heard, but aside from that, nothing really super significant happens as they essentially just spend the tape trying to widen the hole. Caving information. This tape is the same day as the last entry, and it starts with Ted back up on the surface, explaining that he's left B to continue chipping away at widening the hole. Ted goes on to explain that he realized that the tapes are mostly for himself, so he wasn't worried too much about formatting or explaining specific caving terms and practices, but he realized that if he's gonna release them, that only other cavers would really know what he's talking about. So he decided to head back to the surface and give a guided walkthrough of the cave system for any possible newcomers who come across these tapes. He explains a little more on some vague location information of the cave, saying that only the locals and a few other cavers know of this cave's location, and that he and B try to be respectful and clean up some graffiti and trash if they come across it. He goes over the equipment that they brought, and they leave a lot of it on the surface, Since it's so late, it's unlikely that any other cavers will really show up. Side note, it's unfortunate how nice and innocent Ted is, because I know that shit is just gonna get bad at some point. Ted rappels into the entrance of the cave, leaving his harness at the entrance of the rappel site, since he says that they don't really need it. Walking further into the cave, Ted shows some tree roots, which look super ominous and horrifying in these lighting conditions. Coming across the graffiti, Ted tries to show us, but the light of the flashlight washes a lot of it out, so it's difficult to see what is being written. Traversing further in, Ted yaps about some other caving tidbits, such as coming across bat shit and some spiky, rocky protrusions that can kinda hurt if you slide across them. When he comes across a larger open clearing in the cave, Ted says that he has a lesson for us. No, not in that way. He sets the camera down and faces it at himself and then proceeds to shut off his light. He sits in the dark for a few moments, saying that he likes to do this essentially to be more in the moment and connected to the cave. While doing this, you have no sight at all, so if anything comes up to you in the dark, you have to rely on your hearing and your touch. After the most agonizing and anxiety-ridden minute or two, he turns the light back on, and he says it's always best to bring a second light source as backup, or even a third emergency light, such as glow sticks, which he says he hopes he never has to use. I really don't like the possible foreshadowing. Ted advances down a tight crawl space and goes over how important it is to stay calm, and that he's made a lot of personal progress with keeping his nerves in tight situations like this. And the whole time he's yapping, I can't help but look at anything else besides the dark, ominous spot right next to his head that the camera keeps focusing on. Passing a pool in the cave, Ted says that some people are even crazier than he is, and they'll bring scuba gear and dive in the pools to see how deep they go. At the end of the entry, Ted hears a mysterious noise in the distance, which he chalks up to just being B working with the drill or hammer. Ted finally makes it back to B, and they switch shifts on carving out the hole into the deeper cave. Whip. This tape takes place on February 10th, 2001. Ted is on the surface explaining that he's excited to get deeper into this cave because they'll be the first humans to do so, and it's just something new and exciting to be a part of. This time, Ted and B have brought Whip, a caving dog, that will help them traverse the cave. Down in the cave, Whip frolics in the cave water, and Ted asks B if he was able to find out any information about the weird rumbling, and some other cavers said that it could just be the rain that they've been having, or an underground waterfall, but Ted doesn't seem convinced by this answer. Traveling further down, they reach the hole and Whip has stopped in her tracks and is staring ahead, not moving forward. Ted and B comment she doesn't really normally act like this, and they think it's strange. But for a good chunk of the tape, the two of them continue drilling the hole in shifts. While B is drilling, he stops suddenly and he stares ahead, and Ted asks what's wrong, but B doesn't respond. So Ted asks again, and B says he heard something inside, almost like rocks dragging against each other. Ted says it's probably nothing, and B seems reluctant, and he still stares down the hole, but eventually they continue drilling. Taking a break, Whip is still acting strange and seems distracted. And, being tired themselves, Ted says he'll do one more shift of drilling, and then they can head out and come back another time. While drilling, the drill suddenly dies, and Ted notices that the breeze in the cave has stopped, which is very strange. Ted and B seem a little nervous by that, and they decide to pack up and head out for the night. The Scream. This tape takes place on March 3rd, 2001. The tape begins with Ted sprinting towards B, with panic in his voice asking if B is okay. Ted sets the camera down and tries to comfort B, who has a gash on his arm, and B reassures Ted that he's okay, and that they can clean and bandage his arm. B reassures Ted that everything is fine. The camera cuts to Ted telling B that the breeze and rumbling are back, and that the camera's back on. Ted sets the camera down and explains that they didn't bring the dog this time because she didn't like the cave for some reason, which is very strange, and that he'll take the first shift on drilling. Ted spends the next few minutes drilling and chiseling the gap wider. Ted takes a break and talks to B and excitedly proposes the idea of Spanish explorers who sealed the cave off and maybe have some hidden treasure deep inside. They also mention maybe finding some kind of valuable crystals, but the only way to find out is to crack open Floyd's tomb. Ted begins another shift of drilling, but as he drills, a strange noise from the drill begins, and when the drill shuts off, a low groaning scream continues from inside the cave. Ted and B stare at the hole, in shock, and B mentions the breeze has stopped again. We cut to another shot of Ted continuing to drill, and B pans the camera away from Ted, and then a sharp growl rips through the cave. Ted meekly says he thinks they should wrap up, and B agrees in a worrisome tone, and they agree to pack up and call it quits for the night. Entering Floyd's tomb. This tape takes place on March 4th, 2001. B records Ted explaining he thinks they forgot to record themselves in front of Mystery Cave, and that yesterday was something. That earlier excitement and joy is now absent from Ted's voice. He talks in a much calmer and nervous tone. The duo head deeper in the cave to the passage's end and continue drilling. B finishes drilling and Ted begins squeezing inside, saying it's a weird angle and he's gonna try to get as far inside as he can. B is instructed to tie a rope to Ted's feet, and Ted begins his crawl inside Floyd's tomb. We get a nice ass shot of Ted as he whimpers and struggles to get past Floyd's tomb. B ties the rope to one of Ted's feet, and Ted says it's a tight squeeze. Ted makes it further down, but he reaches a point he can't squeeze through, and says they'll need one more trip to break through and make it all the way past Floyd's tomb. Ted is successfully able to squeeze his way back to B, and the two celebrate making it this far, and that they'll need to come back with more tools. Ted finishes the tape by saying that they were successful, and that they'll be back. They both are super excited, and B even climbed out on his own very quickly, which he said is an accomplishment if you know how B is as a person. Exploring beyond Floyd's tomb. This tape takes place on March 7th, 2001. The tape begins with Ted and B trekking inside the cave, saying they need to get rid of the rocks inside Floyd's tomb. Ted and B form a plan on clearing the rocks, and that Ted will then see if he can fit through completely. After a few minutes of walking and yapping and more digging, Ted thinks he's cleared enough to squeeze further in, and he tells B his plan on rotating his body and pushing the rocks through as he crawls in, and he's able to squeeze his way through past Floyd's tomb. Once on the other side, Ted describes what he sees, which is a passage that he decides to go and explore for about 30 minutes, and B tells him to stay safe. Ted is now alone and ventures deep into the new passage, with a little flashlight that doesn't really illuminate much on the camera, so it's just a lot of darkness, brief rock shots, and heavy breathing. Ted finds some crystal formations on the wall, some strangely placed rocks and boulders, and he finds a strange symbol carved on the wall. Ted heads back to the entrance where he started and calls out to B, who responds. But just after this, Ted hears a strange growl scream noise similar to the last tape, but he ignores it and crawls back to the other side and rejoins B. He excitedly tells B all about the stuff he saw and that there's a lot left to explore still, and they need to bring a third person to help explore next time, Joe. This tape takes place on April 14th, 2001. The tape begins with Ted introducing Joe, their new third diver, to join them in exploring the new passages. The trio rappel down inside of the cave and head towards the passage entrance. Ted explains that Joe will head inside first, then himself, and they'll explore the new area together for about 2 hours. As Joe checks out the entrance to go past Floyd's tomb, B comes up to Ted and asks if they should tell Joe about the strange events from earlier. Ted is reluctant to tell Joe since he doesn't believe that they're putting Joe in any danger, and that they themselves don't feel that they're in danger. Joe and Ted crawl into the other side, and as they're getting situated, Ted gets up and he hits his head on a rock while standing up. His head begins pouring blood, and Joe tries to assist Ted with his injury. Ted doesn't think he can continue and is lightheaded, so he decides to head back to B. Ted tells Joe he's welcome to explore without him, but only for 20 minutes and to come straight back. And or if he finds the symbols or crystals, to also come straight back. Ted and Bea have a small talk while waiting for Joe and discuss maybe getting a motel for the night for Ted's head injury. Ted mentions he doesn't hear the wind anymore, and it's very quiet. Ted tells Bea that the last trip out to the tomb, he could have sworn that he heard rocks grinding against each other. After about 30 minutes, Ted and Bea begin yelling for Joe, and they see Joe's light in the distance. Joe crawls back through, covered in blood and silent. Ted asks Joe if he's okay and what happened, but Joe doesn't respond, simply standing with a blank expression on his face. Ted asks if Joe found the symbols and if he's okay, and Joe just says no. When asked what happened, Joe ignores them and says he's going to go and begins walking towards the exit. Ted and Bea quickly pack and try to follow Joe as Ted apologizes to Joe. We should have never opened the cave. This tape takes place on April 28, 2001. The tape starts with Ted on the surface at night, not knowing how to start the tape. Ted reflects that the audience probably thinks that him and Bea are irrational, naive, or ignorant, and that it's a fair assumption. He explains that the cave represents months of hard work and multiple emotions ranging from fear to joy. He says that Bea and him felt that they had to come back and follow through, and that they can't abandon their commitment to the cave, that it's a part of them now, and that they have to see it to the end. He says that they tried to talk to Joe about what happened, but it seems like Joe isn't really there anymore. Ted and Bea decided to come back and conquer the cave so they can finally move on. Ted says that him and Bea brought 2 low-voltage phones so that they can keep in contact. He goes on to say that they tried to talk to Joe multiple times. They called his work and found out he called in sick. They even tried to visit his house, which had all the lights on, but his car and himself were not home. Ted and Bea make their way down into the cave, and Ted crawls into the other side, telling Bea that he's heading in. Ted finds the old landmarks from his last visit, and he treks along, making some small side commentary and checking in with Bea on the phone, but nothing super significant. Soon after, the sound of rocks shuffling occurs, and Ted begins rapidly breathing, groaning in pain, and whimpering. Ted gasps for breath and mutters his head. He searches for a light but finds a glow stick, and is able to turn on the glow stick. After catching his breath, Ted is able to get back up and runs through the cave passage, in a panic, with his glow stick as his only light. He turns around to look at one of his other glow sticks from earlier. It's a faint purple, barely illuminating the cave, but suddenly, something blocks the stick, snuffing out the light. Ted begins running again, heavy and fast breathing, carrying just his red glow stick as his light. He finds cover and quiets his breath, silence filling the cave. Then, in the distance, getting closer, are rapid footsteps. Ted begins running again. He makes it to the entrance of the cave and begins yelling to Bea, telling him to run, that something is in there with them. Ted begins gagging violently, questioning what that smell is. He crawls as fast as he can back to the main cave where Bea was, but he becomes stuck halfway through and panics. He's able to free himself and continues running to the main entrance of the mysterious cave. Ted climbs up the first rappel point, and when he gets to the top, he looks at the pile of rope next to him and sees it slowly being pulled down over the edge next to him. Ted goes into a full sprint to the final rappel point, where Bea is rappelling back to the surface, and Ted screams for Bea to climb. And Ted starts climbing as well, still screaming for Bea to keep climbing. And the tape cuts off here. Going back. This tape takes place on May 19th, 2001. The tape begins with a view of the forest in early morning or evening. Then we cut to a close-up of Ted, distraught, saying it's been a minute and he hasn't been doing well. He sees things in the corner of his vision, and he's hearing things. Him and Bea haven't really spoken since the event, and he hasn't been getting much sleep and he's having constant nightmares. Ted says he used to be able to go into caves, but now he can't even go outside. He believes something is outside as well, watching him. He tried researching possible cave myths and legends, but the only lead he got from locals was the legend of the Wendigo. He is convinced to buy a gun because of how scared he is. Suddenly, Ted looks to the door of the room he's in and goes quiet, facing the camera to the door. He whispers that he hears footsteps and that there's something on the other side of the door. In the silence, faint shuffling can be heard and a low growling. Ted exits the room and heads to his stairs, putting the camera down, and he walks to the edge of the stairway before an alarm goes off and he runs back to the camera, which cuts off. The next cut, Ted is in another room in the morning, saying he's doing much better and that he's talked to Bea and Joe, and they've decided to go back to the cave. He's going to bring a gun, and he feels that they need closure to see what's at the end of the cave. He doesn't feel he has a choice and that the cave is calling to him. He needs to return in order to live peacefully. He's going to bring as much materials and tools as he can, such as food, lights, rope, etc. Once at the cave entrance, Ted sets the camera down and addresses his family and friends who have been watching so far. He says that they don't need to worry and that he'll be okay. He expects to arrive back home later that night or next morning, and if anyone wants to see what is under Floyd's tomb, then to stop by and he'll show them whatever video he has. But until then, this is the end of Ted's caving journal. But from Ted's tone, he doesn't sound truly believing of what he is saying. This is his final stop. Thus concludes Ted's caving journal. This series was an absolute thrill to experience, and the creators really nailed everything they were going for. Going back and reading the original story, they hit all the beats and plot points and just all the details. The acting is extremely well done. You can hear and see the fear in each character when they experience the horrors of the cave, especially Ted, who we can only hear for most of his horrors as he carries the camera in first person. This series is a slow burn, but it's well worth it. The tiny, strange occurrences that begin to mount up as time goes on really builds the tension and anxiety of the story, knowing that these characters are making a huge mistake drilling into this forbidden area. The camera work is also very well done. The whole series truly looks like it was filmed back in 2001, with the grainy, low-resolution footage mixed with the washed-up audio. It's a nice little cherry on top of everything. I know many people, myself included, also just find the idea of cave diving absolutely terrifying. Being in the dark in those enclosed spaces for long periods of time. Mix that with the supernatural, and not being truly alone just makes all that 10 times worse, and really brews this unique horror story and series. Please let us know what you thought of this series, and if there are any other recommendations that you guys want us to check out. I hope you enjoyed your time today. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Follow us on our socials. Please be sure to check out any of our other videos that we have. I thank you for your time today, and I shall see you guys again later. See ya.